Friends, I'm testing out the volume level here. How's that? You all quiet down? I've got a story to tell you while we're settling in. It's a story about Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan, who are two of my favorite notoriously liberal theologians. Marcus Borg used to tell a story about Crossan and the time he gave a lecture at Trinity Episcopal Church in Portland. Dom gave the opening talk on Friday evening, said Borg, and then a series of talks on Saturday. Saturday morning, he began his first presentation by saying, "I have to tell you what happened to me last night after my lecture. While I was signing books, a student from the local seminary, the Western Conservative Evangelical Baptist Seminary, came up to speak with me. I told my professor that I was coming out to see you tonight," said the student. And my professor said, "What? You're going to go hear Crossan? Why, Crossan is to the left of Borg." But that's not the punchline. Crossan said to the student, "Please give my best regards to your professor and tell him that the real problem is that both Borg and Crossan are to the right of Jesus. And rumor has it that Jesus sits at the right hand of God." Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Buteau. I am one of the pastors here at First Churches, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you progressive Democrats to the Meeting House of Northampton. For 364 years, our congregation has held and preserved the Meeting House as a sacred trust for this city, so we would all have a place to come and sort out how best to live in community with one another. As I look out, I see many familiar faces. I see people with whom I have marched and mourned, sung and stood firm, because you who are gathered here believe, as do we, that a better world is possible. As we gather here tonight, we join a long line of people who have worked to make God's love and justice real. You are in the place where Francis Crowe sat for many years on a Tuesday morning and prayed silently for peace. You are in the sanctuary where Bernie Sanders has spoken, where the Reverend Dr. Andrea Vazian was ordained, and not just Jonathan Edwards, but Peter Ives preached for 20 years. Which is to say that you, my friends, are in good company. So welcome. Whoever you are, whatever you believe, whomever you love, welcome and thank you for coming out to do the work that you have come to do. If you are in need of a restroom tonight while you are here, the men's room is located through the door to your right at the bottom of the stairs. An all-gender, handicapped, accessible restroom is located to your left. Go through Lyman Hall into the parlor, take the door on your left, and you will be there. And now, my friends, I invite you to settle in, but don't you dare settle down, okay? Because we have work to do, and our work is more urgent than ever. I'd like to introduce Russell Friedman, who is the state coordinator for the Progressive Democrats of America in Massachusetts.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, welcome. As Sarah said, my name is Russell Friedman. I'm Massachusetts State Coordinator for Progressive Democrats of America. First, I'd like to thank First Churches for working with us so that we can use this space. I also, of course, want to thank Congressmen McGovern and Khana for taking time to come and dialogue with us. PDA is a national political action committee, and we work on national issues and campaigns inside and outside the Democratic Party. You can find more information about us and sign up for our mailing list in the foyer, or you can visit our webpage, pda-mass.org, or join us for a meeting. We meet here in Northampton at 241 King Street on the second Monday of the month at 7 p.m. PDA relies on donations for survival. During the event, we'll be passing baskets to raise money to defray costs from this event and support our work. Help us if we can. We also have Change Makes Change envelopes in the back table. Even $5 a month can make a big difference. President 45 has engendered and much rightly deserved opposition. But our job as progressives is not just to oppose, but also to develop and implement a progressive agenda moving forward. It's our belief that we must have a Democrat in the White House in 2021, but also that we must be the grassroots movement that will make sure that enhanced Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, and similar programs move through Congress and get signed into law. It's a great privilege to have Congressman Jim McGovern and Congressman Ro Khana here to engage in dialogue. I might add that National PDA has officially endorsed both of these progressive champions for re-election. We urge you to go to their websites, whatever money you don't give the PDA, give to them, and do what you can to make sure that they return to Congress in 2021. A note on the process, each of the members of Congress will have a few minutes to make opening remarks, then we'll be taking questions with a random picking of numbers. If you would like to ask a question and do not have a number already, please raise your hand and someone will bring you a number. First, I'd like to invite Representative Lindsay Sabadosa, to your local state rep and a good friend of ours, to come and say a few words.
Good evening. Settle in, but don't settle down. Those are good words to start this night with. I think those are good words for me to post in my office at the State House, too. So we spent earlier this week, Senator Jamie Eldridge and I spent earlier this week at a conference in Portland, Oregon, about single payer. So I filed the Medicare for All legislation in Massachusetts along with Senator Eldridge, and we traveled out to Oregon to be inspired and to get ideas and to talk to people in other states who are doing that very same thing. And as we were sitting there, one of the speakers got up on stage and they said, "This is an important week. Someone has filed a bill that is going to make it easier for states to implement single payer." The person who filed that bill is in Northampton this evening, Congressman Khana. And I got to turn to Senator Eldridge and kind of say, yeah, my congressman's bringing him here, so I get to ask all the questions. And in the State House, that is a fairly constant refrain when people say, when they lament about their congresspeople and maybe not doing quite enough, and I get to say, yes, but mine does. And nevertheless, I still find things to ask him for. So tonight, I'm going to ask him if he would be one of the first people to sign on to Congressman Khana's bill, so that here in Massachusetts, we can be the first state to implement Medicare for all on the state level. And this is why we love Congressman McGovern. So without further ado, I would like to welcome someone who is absolutely no stranger to Northampton, who possibly shows up here more than just about anybody else, our wonderful Congressman Jim McGovern.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. And first of all, let me thank the incredible Lindsay Sabadosa for that generous introduction, but also for her commitment to all good causes. And we're very, very lucky that we have her. So thank you very much. I also want to recognize some special guests who are in the audience here today. And I'm told that former Congressman John Olver is here. Yes. One of our heroes. Hampshire County Register of Deeds, Mary Olmerding is here. Hampshire County Sheriff Pat Killeen is here. And we have a candidate for Northampton City Council who I met in Joe's Italian restaurant a week, not too long ago. Michael Quinlan is here. And I want to recognize Diane Scherer from the MNA, who's here. And thank you very much. And Pastor Sarah, thank you for those inspirational words. We really appreciate it. And I also want to recognize some of the college Democrats who are here from UMass Amherst, from Amherst College, from Holyoke Community College, and from Smith College. And we are grateful that you're all here. Thank you. And of course, I want to thank PDA. And I have a special place in my heart for PDA. When I first got redistricted out to this part of the state, PDA was one of the first meetings I had. And Russell, thank you for your comments. But also thank the PDA family for not giving up, for understanding that everybody's voice is important, especially during very difficult and challenging times. And so I'm proud to be here under the banner of PDA. And thank you. And of course, Ro Khana, I'm going to introduce him in a minute. But I'm thrilled that he's come here to be in Northampton to speak with all of us tonight and to take questions. Look, it's great to be here in Northampton because Washington is so boring that you need a little excitement, right? But I want to tell you, and I know it's hard because every day you wake up and you turn on the TV, you look at the newspaper, or you go online. We have butterflies in our stomach because we don't know what horrible thing the occupant in the White House, will have done on a given day. And it is frustrating to watch him denigrate that office, and it is horrifying to see the most ugly elements that exist in this country that he embraces on a regular basis. And it is disheartening to see him diminish the standing of our country in the eyes of the world. And I think, it's easy to want to pull the shade, and it's easy to want to walk away and wake up when this is all over with. But we can't. And so I come before you today saying I am hopeful. I am hopeful that we are going to get through this. Our colleague in Congress, the great civil rights leader John Lewis, always says, "This too shall pass." Right? My grandfather used to say, "This too shall pass." Like a kidney stone. It'll be painful, but it will pass. I think he's probably more accurate about kind of where we are right now. But I am hopeful that this president's days are numbered, and either through impeachment or the ballot, we are going to be removing him from office very soon. And I'm also hopeful because of all of you. Never in my life have I seen so much dedicated and fierce activism. Not just in opposing this president, but in advocating for things like Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, talking about the need to, get this crazy military budget under control. I mean, the activism is unbelievable, and I think people feel a renewed sense of purpose. And not only does it feel good to see all this activism, I got to tell you that even in these difficult times, it works. Let me give you two examples. President Trump's first order of business was to get rid of the Affordable Care Act in its entirety. Now, we all want to build on it, we want to improve it, we want Medicare for all, but he wanted to eliminate it. And what that would have meant, if he got his way, early on in his administration, it would have meant that people with pre-existing conditions could be denied coverage. It would have meant that you couldn't keep your kid on your insurance until they were 26. It would have meant all the essential benefit guarantees that are required by the law that insurance companies have to cover certain things would disappear. And there was an outcry all across this country. And you know what? You won. The bottom line is that he didn't get his way. At the end of the day, the pressure on members of Congress and on those United States senators was just enough for him to be denied a victory. That would not have happened without the determined activism of people in this room, in this church, and all across the country. Let me give you another one. The other day, he announced he wanted to host the G7 summit at his resort in Florida, right? He said that he didn't believe in the phony emoluments clause. I hate to tell him it's in the Constitution, right? And it's in the Constitution so people like him who occupy the office of the presidency cannot enrich themselves. But there was an outcry. People were calling my office, they're calling all over the country. And the pressure on Republican members was so great that they told him, please, we have our hands full defending all the other crazy stuff you do. Please don't do this. And he withdrew. So, I mean, the bottom line is, even in these difficult times when the deck seems stacked against us, I mean, the activism works. And so I'm a firm believer in people power. And when I look out in this church today, I'm reminded of the power of the people. And I'm reminded that the power of the people is always greater than the people in power. And so together, we're going to bring that message to Donald Trump, and we are going to win. And by the way, the president likes to say that, well, Democrats are obsessed with impeachment. Well, look it. I mean, I don't think he's fit for office. I was ready to vote for impeachment a long time ago, but I'm not obsessing over it. What I'm obsessed about is the quality of life for people in my district and people in this country. What I'm obsessed about is people who are working 2, 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet because they're not being paid a livable wage. You know, what I'm obsessed with is the fact that we live in the richest country in the history of the world, and 40 million of our fellow citizens don't know where the next meal is going to come from. They're hungry. You know, what I'm obsessed with, you know, is the fact that, you know, we're destroying our planet with each passing day, and that Congress isn't doing a damn thing about it. Well, let's put it this way: the House is, the Senate isn't. I'm obsessed with worry over whether or not this president will wake up one day, you know, and decide, you know, to push the nuclear button or start an unnecessary war someplace in the world. So that's what I'm obsessed with. The impeachment stuff, you know, the process is moving forward. And I don't know when it's all going to end, but it needs to be a process that has integrity, and it needs to be a process that also elevates the discussion in this country around the issues of why he is being impeached, but also providing a civics lesson, a lesson on the Constitution to the American people about why this remedy is the right remedy. We're going to get there. But, you know, while he gets up and tweets and insults every day, I mean, we passed H.R. 1 in the House to try to get money out of politics and to deal with, you know, the end partisan gerrymandering. We passed H.R. 4, the Equality Act, basically to ensure that the LGBTQ Americans have the same rights as everybody else. We passed the DREAM Act, and we passed the Promise Act. We passed H.R. 8. Closing all kinds of loopholes in our gun laws, and also we passed universal background checks, and we're challenging Mitch McConnell to at least bring it up and debate it. We passed a bill to stop the president from withdrawing from the Paris Agreement on the climate crisis. We passed an increase in the minimum wage in the House to bring it up to $15. Quite frankly, it should be higher, but nonetheless, the federal minimum wage needs to be at least $15. That passed the House. We passed the Paycheck Fairness Act, guaranteeing that women get paid the same salary that men do. But as Russell said, and I'm going to close with this, as Russell said, you know, we need to start planning for when we enlarge our margin of in the House, and when we win back the Senate, and when we have a very different president. And we have to start talking about what we're going to do. And you know, one of the areas that we need to focus on is this military budget. And we have to start talking about it now, so that people are comfortable with it, and that when we have all these great victories, we can hit the ground running. I mean, the bottom line is we need to take this opportunity to actually start planning what we're going to do when we win. And look, the bottom line is we spend so much money on the military that it's not even funny, it's tragic. Our military budget is so big, Dr. Strangelove is impressed. That's how big it is. And we need to start redefining this discussion about national security. And I get really worried because even now, even in the Democratic debates, you know, we have these questions on national security. Everybody seems to be responding to, you know, well, how many troops should we have? How many bombs should we have? I mean, the bottom line is, when we talk about national security, we need to broaden that definition. National security, yeah, means protecting our country, but it's more than the number of bombs we have. You know, it's whether people have quality jobs. It's whether, you know, we have good schools, whether we have roads and bridges that are not crumbling. That's all part of our national security. We need a strong economy. that we breathe and the water that we drink. It means making sure that everybody has enough to eat in this country. It's making sure that we don't destroy this planet. I mean, we are now being attacked by these storms like never before, all due to our neglect of this planet. That's a national security issue too. And we have to start having honest discussions about, in terms of the military that we have, what do we need? I don't think we should be spending billions and trillions of dollars modernizing our nuclear stockpile. I think we ought to be leading the world in arms control negotiations to lower the stockpile and ultimately move to the abolitionment of nuclear weapons, once and for all. That is the leadership that we should be demonstrating around the world. And I have to tell you, as a lot of you know, I do a lot of work on hunger and nutrition. Those are issues that are near and dear to my heart, not just here in the United States, but around the world. Hunger around the world is getting worse. It's getting worse. To a hungry child, Gandhi had this great idea, to a hungry child, God can appear only as a loaf of bread. I suspect that there would be a lot less terrorism and more peace in the world if American foreign policy borrowed more from Gandhi than it did from Attila the Hun. We're going to have to start talking about this. And I also want to say one other thing. People want to know how you pay for the Green New Deal. Well, one of the ways is we, stop investing in nuclear weapons and we start investing, in green technologies. And there's a great report by Timmons Wallace called Warheads to Windmills, How to Pay for the Green New Deal. I would encourage you, he's right here, I would encourage you to read it and to download it online because it makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the problems. When things make a lot of sense in Washington, it's always difficult to do, right? But this makes sense. And so that's where we need to go. So now I want to introduce our special guest. I could say that Ro Khana is a dedicated member of Congress who fights for his constituents. And I could say that he has been out front on ending Citizens United, ending the war in Yemen, ensuring that there is opportunity in our economy, that nobody is left behind, supporting advanced manufacturing, reducing our ridiculously bloated military budget, and promoting human rights. All of that is true. But it doesn't capture how important Ro Khana is to our caucus. When people want to know what the right way to vote is, when people want to know what the right thing to do is, Ro is one of the people they turn to. He is a voice of unsurpassed moral clarity, and I am so proud that he is the vice chair of our Progressive Caucus, and I am grateful that all he has done to not only end the war in Yemen, but so many other conflicts around the world. And I'm thankful that he came to Northampton, Massachusetts to speak to all of you tonight and to engage in a discussion. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very honored. Thank you for your hospitality. I am so honored to be here in Northampton. I'm honored to be here with Representative McGovern. Sometimes when you're the congressperson from a district, your own district may not appreciate how much of a leader you are. And I just want to say a few words about Representative McGovern. He is the leading voice for human rights in the Congress. I got to Congress in 2016 and we were going to do the War Powers Resolution on Yemen. Almost no one in the leadership was willing at the time, candidly, to help out, except for one person, and that was Jim McGovern, who had done that with Syria. He worked to help us get the resolution. The Republicans kept opposing it for 2 years. Finally, when we took power, And Jim McGovern became the chair of the Rules Committee, which other than Speaker is probably the most important position in the House, because you get to decide what goes on the floor or not. Representative McGovern said this is going to be our priority, and with the help of Senator Sanders, for the first time in the history of the United States, because of his leadership, we passed the War Powers Resolution to stop the war in Yemen. I don't want to embarrass him, and I've said this publicly in the past. I love Speaker Pelosi. She should be Speaker as long as she wants. But I think there is another great candidate afterwards, and that is Representative. I want to just acknowledge briefly Representative Sarah Butteau. Where's Representative Butteau?
Judy Sabadosa?
Sabadosa.
Yes.
Oh, they gave me the wrong.
I'm the pastor.
That's right. Sorry. Representative Baradosa. Thank you for introducing the single-payer legislation. Thank you for being a leader on that. The state universal bill that we have introduced will allow you to have states get a waiver and pass single-payer. I just want to point out that in Canada, there was a province that passed single-payer 10 years before Canada did. So if Massachusetts and Canada and California take the lead, it will make an enormous difference. So thank you for your leadership. Being in church reminds me of the time I was in church with Barbara Lee about 6 months ago. And we got to go down to see President Carter. And he's, of course, just had a fall and is recovering from a hip fracture. But we got to see him soon after he had a hip fracture. And he was preaching at Sunday school a week or two after his fracture. A remarkable, really, individual. And he asked the congregation, he said, what does it mean for America to be a superpower? And, some people said, well, it means to have a strong economy, it means to have strong national security, strong education. And President Carter said, let me tell you what I think it means. I think what it means to be a superpower is to have people around the world want to come to Washington, D.C. for wisdom, for help in bringing peace, for help in standing up for human rights, for help in solving climate change, for a leadership that will make a more peaceful planet. That's what it means for a nation to be a superpower. And we got to speak to him for a bit afterwards, and he said that China has not been in a war since 1979. Can anyone guess how many conflicts we've been in since 1979? 40 conflicts. 40 conflicts. China's been putting their money in high-speed rail, in education, in high-speed internet. Imagine if we had not spent the $6 trillion, 18 years in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, all of the conflicts, and invested it in our infrastructure, in our healthcare, in our education, in our future. Does anyone doubt that that not just would have been the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do for the United States of America to lead the 21st century? We know that we are moving towards a knowledge economy. And that the biggest investment the country is going to make to lead in that 21st century is an investment in our people. And if you'll give me a few minutes in my remarks before we take questions, let me outline 3 of those areas I think we ought to invest. The first, of course, is Medicare for all, single payer. Now, let me just answer, or try to answer, in my view, some of the disingenuous arguments against Medicare for all. How many people here are on Medicare or know someone in their family who's on Medicare? Okay? How many of you believe that your freedoms are being infringed? But this is literally the argument, that we're going to take away people's freedom. Right? It's an open audience. How many people in Medicare believe that they're losing their freedom? Of course you don't. Of course you don't. Lyndon Johnson, when he passed Medicare, thought that we should have everyone eventually be on Medicare. That was the original goal. And the reason none of you raised your hands thinking you have your freedom infringed is because Medicare means more benefits, less cost. You can talk to the doctors. They'll tell you if there's someone who's a Medicare patient, it's far easier to get approval for procedures. God forbid you have a cancer or heart condition and you have private insurance, and then you have to get that approved. So all we're talking about is getting rid of the marketing costs, the administrative costs, the excessive profit costs, and giving that money back to individuals so they can get better health care. And by getting more people into the system, we're actually going to get to improve Medicare, to have long-term care, to have dental and vision covered. That's really the system. When they say, well, what is it going to cost? It's going to, the other thing is they say, okay, it's going to cost $34 trillion. Here's what they don't tell you. The current system costs $49 trillion. Obviously, healthcare costs money. No one's saying you don't have to pay doctors and nurses and hospitals. The question is, what's going to cost more? And it's common sense that a system that's not going to have Aetna CEO making $59 million, and that's not going to have big pharma profits, and that's not going to have middlemen involved in insurance is going to cost less, insure more people, and help our businesses actually be more competitive to stay in the United States. That's one of the other points, that most CEOs, most businesses, they want Medicare for all. They don't want that burden on them to go to compete overseas. The second point I want to talk about is an investment in college and in childcare. All the times they say, we can't afford to make public college free. Representative McGovern said that. How many times do they say that? We can't afford that. $80 billion, the amount of money it's 2 years in Afghanistan, we could have free public college across this country. $80 billion. By the way, $80 billion is also the defense increase that Trump has asked for since Obama has been president. Over $100 billion defense increase. Do you think the additional aircraft carriers or war contingency fund is more in the United States' interest? Or making sure that everyone has post-high school education? We should have done this 20 years ago. We knew then we were moving to a knowledge economy, and yet we failed in so many places to invest in post-secondary education. If we made high school free in 1945, why do we think in the year 2020 that just having the same 12 years of education is enough? We're competing with 1.2 billion people in China and India and other parts of the world. We need to make sure that from childcare and before elementary school and after high school that we're investing in the college of, in the education of our people to compete in a global economy. The third point I would say is we have to figure out how do we create jobs, particularly in communities that have been left behind. No child, no person should have to leave their hometown to find a good paying job. And what we've seen in this country is my district, Silicon Valley, extraordinary opportunity, extraordinary wealth. But so many places in America, you've seen the hollowing out of small towns, the dwindling of church congregations, the closing of stores. They've been left out. When the president went and sold them a falsity, said, I'm going to bring back the $60,000, $70,000 jobs. I'm going to bring back your pride. The only way we overcome that sentiment is to convince them that the future is going to be more jobs, more possibility, more prosperity for those communities than the past. That's the only argument, not against the president. There are tons of arguments against the president, but against the sentiment that animated him. We have to acknowledge how many people feel left out of the globalization and technology revolution. And the promise of technology actually was that we were going to be able to have these jobs in communities left out. That you no longer needed concentration of opportunity, that people could be in any community, live with their family, live in the community they love, not have to leave or move. and be able to succeed. And so we need to make those investments in technology training and investment in new industry to be able to bring these jobs to communities that have been left out so that they can be part of the 21st century instead of the investment in these wars. Let me end with this thought before opening it up for questions. I appreciated Jim's reference to Gandhi and my values. My grandfather spent 4 years in jail during Gandhi's independence movement in the 1940s with Gandhi in India. And when Trump had the rally, I'm sure many of you watched it, and people started chanting, "Send her back." How many people saw that rally? Chilling. And the media started asking members of Congress, I think they went down the list, and they said, we need to get members of Congress who have different sounding names and different backgrounds and ask if they've ever been told to go back from where they came from. And so finally I did one of these interviews, and they asked me that, and I said, well, I was born in Philadelphia in 1976, our bicentenary, and my parents immigrated from India, and my grandfather was involved in Gandhi's independence movement. And do I remember a time in a Little League game or in a basketball game that someone said, go back to India? Sure. But that's not what I remember about my childhood in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I remember teachers who believed in me. I remember neighbors who believed in me, Little League coaches who believed in me, faith leaders who believed in me. And then at the age of 40, this country elected an Indian American of Hindu faith to represent arguably the most economically powerful district in the world. See, that is the story of America. And it's a story that we don't have to tell, that Abraham Lincoln told in 1858. And one of the things I'll end with is if you have a break and you don't read any tweets, and you read 2 pages of Lincoln's 1858 oration on July 4th, you would have more wisdom than the collective Congress put together. That's the truth. It's the truth. And Lincoln had a really tough situation that he was dealing with in 1858. He was trying to understand how could he justify German Americans and French Americans being American? Because back in 1858, does anyone know what you had to do to be American? You had to show that your family went back to the founding and be able to trace your heritage back to the founding. I'm hesitant to ask in this audience how many people can do this. But the point is that Lincoln was struggling to understand, how do I convince people that they're American if they can't trace their heritage back to the founding? Because back then there was a sense that you really needed to have fought in the Revolutionary War, been part of that to be an American. And so Lincoln gives this oration on July 4th, and he says, if you believe in this country, in the Declaration of Independence, if you believe in the Constitution, then there's an electric cord that runs through your soul, and you are flesh of the flesh, blood of the blood of the American founders. See, it's not that Trump is amoral, it's not that he's terrible in so many ways, it's that he has forgotten what it means to be American. He's forgotten about what makes us American. And I believe at this moment, in a place like Northampton, the way we're going to reclaim this country is not by out-yelling him, not by, yes, we'll impeach him, but it's about inspiring this country to remember the values, the decency, the kindness that have made us the nation that we are. Thank you.
so raise your hand. Otherwise, Susan's going to come up. Susan's going to call the numbers like 3 at a time, one on each microphone, and then you can ask your questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Siegel, and I am an... Am I on? Yep. Okay. My name is Susan Siegel, and I am an active member of the PDA, Massachusetts chapter, and I've been asked to do this task of our audience to ask questions of these wonderful congressmen here. So I'm going to pick 3 numbers at a time on your ticket stubs. I'm going to read the last 3 numbers because the numbers are like, there's like 8 numbers there. So the last 3 numbers. I'd like you to come to this side first. We'll alternate back and forth. This side and line up here and you can ask your question. All right? So the first 3 numbers I'm going to just pick here and you can start. The first person is 088. 088. All right. Second number is 080. And the third number is 114. So if you can line up here, and then the next grouping will line on the other side. Who's got the mic?
Hi, thank you so much for coming. So I am not obsessed with impeachment, but I do have an impeachment question. I would like to get both of your thoughts on keeping the impeachment narrowly focused versus broadly focused. I know there's been a lot of debate within the House about whether to just keep it about the one article of impeachment or to make it be about more. I feel like Trump has done many impeachable things, and I'm just wondering what you're thinking about narrow versus broad.
Well, so I think we have to go with the strongest case possible. Look, if we were to go through all the things that are potentially impeachable with this president, it would take us a decade to do the hearings. I mean, I think he's in violation of the Emoluments Clause. I think he's abused his power. I think he's been part of obstruction of justice. I go on and on and on with that. But I mean, I do think, we have to go with where the overwhelming evidence is right now, and to build the strongest possible case. Because part of the deal is not just whether or not we get a majority in the House to vote to impeach. Part of the deal here is we need to bring the American people along with us. We need the majority of Americans to understand what the wrongdoing is, and to understand what our constitutional responsibilities are. That doesn't mean we neglect what he's doing in terms of violating the Emoluments Clause or about 1,000 other things. We have committees of oversight doing those hearings, and if there were other things that that are ready to go, they may be added to it. But there's nothing that says that you can't continue the investigations. So I think the goal here is to go with the strongest case, something that the American people can understand. And I think people do understand that there's something fundamentally wrong with a president asking a foreign government to dig up dirt on a potential political rival, basically not just to dig up, to manufacture dirt on a potential political rival, and withhold military assistance, as a way to get them to do that. That is wrong. That is an abuse of power.
I agree with everything Representative McGovern said. I would just add that the public focus and the public case has been on the call for an investigation in Ukraine. And by the way, a call, according to public testimony, that Trump wanted Zelensky to have a press conference, not just to investigate, but to announce to the world that he was investigating it. I mean, if there's any more evidence that this was motivated to try to sabotage Biden, I don't know what more you need. So I think we need to continue to hammer that point home. My guess is when the articles of impeachment are drafted by the Judiciary Committee, they will include a lot of the work that they have already done on obstruction and emoluments and other things. But the public focus should be on this, because that seems to have broken through with not just Democrats, but with independents and even some Republicans.
Hi, we saw you on TV last night. You were great.
Thank you.
So my question, concern, is about Medicare for all. And since we view Trump as an existential threat, I keep looking at the polling for Medicare for all, and it's abysmal. And I'm really worried that if that becomes a central tenet of our platform, it's going to bomb. And now, with difficulties explaining how it could be paid for, some hedging, all of that, I'm really worried. I don't think a year is enough time to bring people on board, like when you were saying, Congressman McGovern, about, with the impeachment, really bringing people on. I think this is a bigger leap. And so my question is, what do you say to that? Thanks.
Well, I appreciate the question. First of all, I'd say that our Democratic candidates agree, there's about 90% agreement among the Democrats, compared to Donald Trump, who wants to gut Medicare and get people off of health care. All the Democrats are for a goal of getting to universal health care. So I'd like us to, instead of fighting against each other in ways that could be used against us in the general election, start to acknowledge that the Democratic Party is for universal health care, everyone on the debate stage, and Trump is the one who is actually opposed to any expansion of health care, and went out to the country and said he was going to increase benefits, lower costs, and create more jobs in his health care. By the way, in Trump's book, he proposes a single-payer healthcare system in the America We Deserve 2000. He actually says that a Canadian single-payer healthcare system is better than American healthcare, and that while he's a free market person, he recommends the Canadian system. And the reason, the polling, I think, is more complex. Most people poll well when it says Medicare for all. They then get hesitant if you say, okay, that means that you're going to lose your current insurance. And there are 2 points to make. That's because they associate it with losing their current doctor or their current healthcare provider. When the reality is, Medicare for all will provide people with more opportunity to go to any doctor. You no longer will have in-network care. And the second thing is the bills that have been proposed in Congress actually do not eliminate private insurance. That is, none of the bills do that. What they do is extend what current Medicare is. If you're currently on Medicare, that's why I asked the question initially, you know that there's no choice. Everyone has to get on it at 65 if you want to get Social Security benefits. And you can't get duplicative insurance. There's no, if you're over 65, try getting private insurance to sell you when Medicare will get you. They can't under the law. And that's all that the current bill says. So if what we'll tell people is here's what you're going to get. You're going to get government's going to provide you with Medicare health care. They're going to do it at a lower cost. You're going to save thousands and thousands of dollars. You're going to now get to go to the doctor you want. You're going to get better benefits. We're going to create more jobs. And by the way, if you really want more insurance because you for whatever reason aren't happy with it, you can. You can go buy more insurance. But why would you say no to getting a good healthcare benefit for a cheaper cost and retaining the ability to get private insurance? And I think that is the message that you will see whoever our nominee is run with in the general election.
And let me just say, I think we can't get too deep into the weeds and get distracted about kind of what the goal is here. The bottom line is, if we were to design, I think even if this was a room full of insurers, right? And I said, if you were to design a healthcare system from scratch, I mean, I think we would all agree it would look nothing like the healthcare system we have in place right now. And this is probably the case with Ro, but with me as well. I mean, the casework that we get in our office from individuals in our constituencies who have health care, who get sick or somebody in their family gets sick and they realize they're not getting covered for things. And we have to go and fight these insurance companies on behalf of these families. And sometimes we win, and sometimes, sadly, we don't. I had a group of parents come to see me a couple of weeks ago whose kids have diabetes. And they said to me, insulin's been around forever. Why does it keep on going up in cost? I mean, we're worried that, if anything happens to us, that our kids will not be able to afford the life-saving medication they need. By the way, that same insulin in Canada is like 1/10 of the cost. What the hell's going on here, right? So, look, I think what's going to happen in the general election is that, Trump is going to go on this rampage about how Democrats are socialist or communist or whatever the scary word he wants to use is going to be, that we want to take this away and take that away. Bottom line is, many people in this country, many millions, don't even have, the basic health care that we think everybody should be entitled to have. So we just have to do better. And so I understand the point. And when you listen to the Democratic debate, people have different gradations of kind of where they are in Medicare for all. Some want public option, some want this. We will work all that out. But I think we would all be better served right now, even those of us like myself who believe in Medicare for all, to simply say, we're not going to defend the status quo. We're going to fix this. And our ability to get a better healthcare system in this country is going to depend on whether we elect, a Democratic Senate and whether we elect more like-minded people in the House of Representatives, and whether we get rid of the guy who currently occupies the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Hello, thank you. My question is for Congressman Khana. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman, and thank you particularly for the example you've set as an Indian American in public service. My question is, you wrote the Internet Bill of Rights about a year or two ago in response to the Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica scandals that occurred in the 2016 election. And yesterday, we witnessed Mark Zuckerberg testify in front of Congress and essentially admit that he had no capability whatsoever to control the monster he has set in motion with Facebook. And he indicated that he feels no particular responsibility to do it either. So my question to you is, do you think that the Internet Bill of Rights needs to be changed or made more comprehensive in light of the testimony we saw yesterday? And what steps do you think we should take to prevent people like Mark Zuckerberg from exerting undue influence over our democracy in ways that they are not prepared to do?
Well, both very thoughtful questions. Let me answer the first one. The Speaker Pelosi had asked me last year to draft an Internet Bill of Rights. It has a few key principles that people should know what's happening to their data. You should have to consent before your data is being collected or transferred. You should have the right to delete your data. Now, I would add to that, based on the testimony, Mark Zuckerberg was before a congressional committee, and he was asked basically, if you know that a political ad is false, would you remove it? And he said, no, that's not Facebook's ability to remove it. And I think that, obviously Facebook needs to do better, but we need a congressional regulatory framework. The reason is right now on broadcast television, for example, a broadcast station cannot remove a political ad. I wish they could have removed some of my opponent's political ads, which were false, but they actually can't remove them and they aren't allowed to censor. The difference is in social media, it's not just a one-time ad. Once you have something false on the internet, it propagates and it can go viral. And so this is a real challenge, but I'm not sure that I want a company making the decision about whether to remove it or not. And so what I believe we ought to do as Congress is create an independent commission of experts that where you could notify them if there is a clear, blatant disregard for truth or false ad, and that notification would trigger removal, like we do in a copyright violation, and then social media companies would have to comply with that. And that would get around this concern of, well, we don't want companies being arbiters of the truth, but still make sure that we don't have blatantly false information out on the internet. I also believe that we need thoughtful antitrust regulation. And let me give you a very quick example about the complexity of this. So there was a store owner, a small business owner I knew in northern Michigan who wanted to sell t-shirts. And they couldn't get a brick and mortar store up and profitable. And Amazon helped them out, and they did these ads, and they ended up selling t-shirts online. So for a positive story. Well, then what happened? Amazon copied their ad, they copied their t-shirt, and started selling those t-shirts online to undermine the small business. So the point is, technology has great promise on the one hand, but it can also do great harm. And what we need is thoughtful regulations and antitrust that say you can't use these platforms for anti-competitive purposes.